I'll be right back with that, she assured him. With an unnecessary smile, but he didn't see it. She was watching me. What? I asked when she left. How are you feeling? I'm fine, I replied, surprised by his intensity. You don't feel dizzy, sick, cold? Should I? He chuckled at my puzzled tone. Well, I'm actually waiting for you to go into shock. His face twisted up into that perfect crooked smile. I don't think that will happen, I said after I could breathe again. I've always been very good at repressing unpleasant things. Just the same, I feel better when you have some sugar and food in you. Right on cue, the waitress appeared with our drink and a basket of breadsticks. She stood with her back to me as he placed them on the table. Are you ready to order? She asked Edward. Bella? He asked. She turned unwillingly towards me. I picked the first thing I seen on the menu. I'll have the mushroom ravioli. And you? She turned back to him with a smile. Nothing for me, he said. Of course not. Let me know if you change your mind. The coy smile was still in place, but he wasn't looking at her, and she left dissatisfied. Drink, he ordered. I sipped at my soda obediently, and then drank more, deeply surprised by how thirsty I was. I realized I was finished with the whole thing when he pushed his glass towards me. Thanks, I muttered, still thirsty. The cold from the icy soda was radiating through my chest, and I shivered. Are you cold? It's just a Coke, I explained, shivering again. Don't you have a jacket? His voice was disapproving. Yes. I looked at the empty bench next to me. Oh, I left it in Jessica's car, I realized. Edward was shrugging out of his jacket. I suddenly realized that I never once noticed what he was wearing. Not just tonight, but ever. I just couldn't seem to look away from his face. I made myself look now, focusing. He was removing a light beige leather jacket now. Underneath he wore an ivory turtleneck sweater. It fit him snugly, emphasizing how muscular his chest was. He handed me the jacket, interrupting my ogling. Thanks, I said again, sliding my arms into his jacket. It was cold. The way my jacket felt when I first picked it up in the morning, hanging in the drafty hallway, I shivered again. It smelled amazing. I inhaled, trying to identify the delicious scent. It didn't smell like cologne. The sleeves were much too long. I shoved them back so I could free my hands. That color blue looks lovely with your skin, he said, watching me. I was surprised. I looked down, flushing, of course. He pushed the breadbasket toward me. Really, I'm not going into shock, I protested. You should be. A normal person would be. You don't even look shaken. He seemed unsettled. He stared into my eyes, and I saw how light his eyes were. Lighter than I'd ever seen them. Golden butterscotch. I feel very safe with you, I confessed, mesmerized into telling the truth again. That displeased him. His alabaster brow furrowed. He shook his head, frowning. This is more complicated than I planned, he murmured to himself. I picked up a breadstick and began nibbling on the end, measuring his expression. I wondered when it would be okay to start questioning him. Usually you're in a better mood when your eyes are so light, I commented, trying to distract him from whatever thought had left him frowning and somber. He stared at me, stunned. What? You're always crabbier when your eyes are black. I expect it then, I went on. I have a theory about that. His eyes narrowed. More theories? I chewed on a small bite of the bread, trying to look indifferent. I hope you are more creative this time, or are you still stealing from comic books? His faint smile was mocking. His eyes were still tight. Well, no, I didn't get it from a comic book, but I didn't come up with it on my own either, I confessed. And, he prompted, but then the waitress strode across the partition with my food. I realized we'd been unconsciously leaning toward each other across the table because we both straightened up as she approached. She set the dish in front of me. It looked good. And then turned quickly towards Edward. Did you change your mind? She asked. Is there anything I can get you? I may have been imagining a double meaning in her words. No, thank you, but some more soda would be nice. He gestured with the long white hands to empty cups in front of me. Sure, moved the empty glasses and then walked away. You were saying? He asked. I'll tell you about it in the car if I paused. There are conditions? He raised one eyebrow, his voice ominous. I do have a few questions, of course. Of course. The waitress was back with two more cokes. She sat them down without a word this time and left again. I took a sip. Well, go ahead, he pushed, his voice still hard. I started with the most undemanding, or so I thought. Why are you in Port Angeles? He looked down, folding his large hands together slowly on the table. His eyes flickered up at me from under his lashes, the hint of a smirk on his face. Next. But that's the easiest one, I objected. Next, he repeated. I looked down, frustrated. I unrolled my silverware, picked up my fork, and carefully speared a ravioli. I put it in my mouth slowly, still looking down, chewing while I thought. The mushrooms were good. I swallowed and took another sip of Coke before I looked up. Okay, then, I glared at him and continued slowly. Let's say, hypothetically, of course, that someone could know what people were thinking, read minds, with a few exceptions. Just one exception, he corrected, hypothetically. All right, with one exception then. I was thrilled that he was playing along, but I tried to seem casual. How does that work? What are the limitations? How would that someone find someone else at exactly the right time? How would he know she was in trouble? I wondered if my convoluted questions even made sense. Hypothetically, he asked. Sure. Well, if that someone... Let's call him Joe, I suggested. He smiled wryly. Joe, then. If Joe had been paying attention, the timing wouldn't have needed to be quite so exact. He shook his head, rolling his eyes. Only you can get into trouble in a town this small. You would have devastated their crime rate statistics for a decade, We were speaking of a hypothetical case, I reminded him frostedly. He laughed at me, his eyes warm. Yes, we were, he agreed. Shall we call you Jane? How did you know? I asked, unable to curb my intensity. I realized I was leaning toward him again. He seemed to be wavering, torn by some internal dilemma. His eyes locked with mine, and I guessed that he was making a decision right then whether or not to tell me the truth. You can trust me, I murmured, looking forward to touch his hand. But he reached away minutely, and I pulled my hand back. I don't know if I have a choice anymore. His voice was almost a whisper. I was wrong. You're much more observant than I gave you credit for. I thought you were always right. I used to be. He shook his head again. I was wrong about you on one other thing as well. You're not a magnet for accidents. That's not a broad enough classification. You are a magnet for trouble. If there is anything dangerous within a 10-mile radius, it will invariably find you. And you put yourself into that category, I guess? His face turned cold, expressionless, unequivocally. I stretched my hand across the table again, ignoring him when he pulled back slightly once more, to touch the back of his hand shyly with my fingertips. His skin was cold and hard like a stone. Thank you. My voice was fervent with gratitude. That's twice now. His face softened. Let's not try for 3, agreed? I scowled but nodded. He moved his hand out from under mine, placing both of his under the table, but he leaned toward me. I followed you to Port Angeles, he admitted, speaking in a rush. I never tried to keep a specific person alive before, and it's much more troublesome than I wouldn't believe, but that's probably just because it's you.